We've got some breaking news out of Israel, and that is that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has fired his defense minister over calling for a halt to a judicial overhaul. Now, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, broke ranks yesterday by publicly urging Benjamin Netanyahu to suspend the legislation that would give that overhaul of the judicial system for a month, so pause it. And he said that the countrywide protests against the overhaul were also affecting regular forces and undermining national security because they had included a growing number of military reservists. Mr. Gallant saying, "I will not facilitate this," he said. It was a very short statement on TV, and he hinted that should the ratification vote be held this week, that he might abstain. So the latest news out of Israel is that Benjamin Netanyahu has fired the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and that was after Mr. Gallant called on the Prime Minister to halt what are controversial plans for an overhaul of the justice system. Now, his intervention comes as Israelis opposed to the changes held mass rallies again across the country. This is the 12th week in a row that they have held those. Let's go to Jerusalem now and speak to Alistair Bunkle, who is on the phone. Bring us up to date, Alistair.
Well, there's been rumours throughout the day that Benjamin Netanyahu, now that he's back in Israel after spending a few days over the weekend in London, would remove his defence minister, Yoav Gallant, from that position after Gallant last night came out publicly and said that he thought there should be a halt in the process of the very controversial judicial reforms. He was the most senior member of Netanyahu's coalition to speak out against the judicial reforms. He was backed by a number of other coalition politicians as well. And Netanyahu has decided to fire him from his post. Now, I think there's a couple of interesting consequences from this. Firstly, what will it mean for those within Netanyahu's party who might privately or publicly have reservations about these judicial reforms? Will it harden their opinions, and will it perhaps convince them that they now need to vote against the Netanyahu government? Secondly, there is two fronts that the Israeli government are fighting on at the moment. And the other one is, of course, the growing tensions in the West Bank. Ramadan is now a few days underway, and these coming weeks are being seen as a really crucial period for the security of Israel and the West Bank. And to remove the defense minister, the politician who oversees the Israeli Defense Forces at this moment, is not without its risks. So this is a move taken by Netanyahu in order to try and shore up his support to push through these reforms, which he's going to try and do at pace this week before the Israeli parliament breaks for the Passover recess. But protests against it are growing bigger and bigger. There are protests tonight outside many of the politicians' homes. Later this week, there'll be a massive protest in the outside the Knesset in Jerusalem. And Netanyahu has his back against the wall, and there are cracks showing in his coalition.
So what does this mean for his future then? If his back is against the wall, and this is the latest move, what's it going to mean for his future?
Well, it really is a good question. And there are a number of paths that this could go down, and it's really hard to predict at the moment. What we can say for certainty is that Netanyahu, despite the opposition within the Israeli public, is determined to carry on with these judicial reforms. And just to recap, for those people who aren't necessarily aware of what it means, it changes the way that judges to the Supreme Court will be elected, and it will give an awful lot more power to the government of the day to push through any rules and laws that they want to do so. And it will remove a lot of oversight that the Supreme Court currently has. And that is why so many Israelis believe what is happening is a dramatic erosion of Israeli democracy. And so that is the kind of the conflict, the political conflict, the societal conflict you've got going on in Israel at the moment. Benjamin Netanyahu is a prime minister for the 6th term in office, and he is leading Israel's most far-right government in Israel's history. And there are a number of far-right politicians in his government who believe very strongly in changing the way the judiciary is formed and using it to potentially push for greater presence in the West Bank, for example, greater rights for ultra-Orthodox Jews. And they, at the moment, seem to have the loudest voices. And many commentators wonder how Benjamin Netanyahu is generally considered to be a very wily politician, a pretty popular politician up until recently in Israel, but how he can maneuver his way out of this, because it's hard to see how there is any good solution for either side.
Okay, Alistair Bunkle for us in Jerusalem. Thank you so much for that update, Alistair. And just to reiterate what's happening here, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has fired his defense minister. That comes a day after the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, called for a halt to what is planned overhaul of the country's judiciary. It has divided the country. There has been no further details from Mr. Netanyahu's office. And Mr. Gallant, he's a former army general. He is a senior member of Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling Likud party. So Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, firing his defense minister tonight.